corporate revenge they never saw coming. My name is Alexandra Martinez, and the day they destroyed me in front of everyone was the day I decided to become unstoppable. I stood in that glass-walled conference room on the 42nd floor, watching my boss, no, my mentor, the woman I'd trusted for 6 years, slide a termination letter across the mahogany table while the entire executive team watched like vultures circling roadkill. "Effective immediately," she said, her voice cold as winter steel. "We're letting you go for gross misconduct and theft of company intellectual property." The room went silent except for the hum of the air conditioning and the sound of my heart shattering into 1,000 pieces. Have you ever had your entire world collapse in 60 seconds? Let me back up, because this story doesn't start with betrayal, it starts with belief. I grew up in a small apartment in Queens with my mother, a seamstress who worked 16-hour days so I could go to college. She died 2 weeks before my graduation, her fingers still calloused from the needle, her dreams living only through me. I promised her grave I wouldn't waste the opportunity she'd bled for. So I climbed. I worked 3 jobs through business school, graduated top of my class, and landed an entry-level position at Meridian Global, one of the most prestigious consulting firms in Manhattan. That's where I met Victoria Chen. She was a senior partner, brilliant and magnetic, the kind of woman who commanded a room just by entering it. She saw something in me during my first presentation, maybe hunger, maybe desperation, and took me under her wing. For 6 years, I was her protege. I worked 100-hour weeks, missed birthdays and holidays, sacrificed relationships and sleep. I built strategies that saved dying companies, presentations that won billion-dollar contracts. Victoria got the credit. I got the promise of partnership. "You're almost there, Alex," she'd say, her hand on my shoulder like a benediction. "One more year, one more big win. Then you'll have everything you've worked for." I believed her. God help me. I believed every word. The big win came in the form of the Castellano account, a family-owned manufacturing empire hemorrhaging money, desperate for a turnaround strategy. I spent 8 months embedded with them, living in Detroit, eating in factory cafeterias, talking to workers on assembly lines. I didn't just analyze spreadsheets. I understood their culture, their people, their soul. The strategy I developed was revolutionary, a hybrid model that preserved jobs while modernizing operations, a blueprint that could transform not just Castellano, but the entire manufacturing sector. I presented it to Victoria on a Friday afternoon in her corner office. She read through the 70-page document in silence, her expression unreadable. Then she looked up and smiled. "This is extraordinary, Alex. This is partner-level work. I'll present it to the executive committee on Monday. Start preparing your partnership paperwork." I floated home that night. I called my best friend Maria and screamed into the phone about finally making it. I bought a bottle of champagne I couldn't afford and toasted my mother's photograph. I slept 4 hours, dreaming of offices with my name on the door. Monday morning, I walked into that conference room expecting celebration. Instead, I found an execution. The head of HR sat at the table next to Victoria, along with 3 other senior partners I barely knew. The door clicked shut behind me with the finality of a prison cell. "Sit down, Alexandra," Victoria said, and her voice had changed. The warmth I'd known for 6 years had evaporated, replaced by something reptilian and cold. "We've discovered some irregularities in your work," she continued, sliding a folder toward me. "Specifically, you've been sharing confidential client strategies with outside parties. We have emails, timestamps, everything we need. You violated your NDA and committed corporate espionage." The words hit me like physical blows. "What? That's insane. I would never." "We have evidence," the HR director interrupted, his voice bored, like he'd done this 1,000 times. "You're terminated effective immediately. Security will escort you out. You have 10 minutes to collect your personal items." I looked at Victoria, waiting for her to laugh to tell me this was some terrible test. But she wouldn't meet my eyes. And that's when I understood. This wasn't a mistake. This was an execution, carefully planned and perfectly executed. The Castellano strategy, I whispered. You're stealing my work. Victoria's smile was thin and sharp. Your work was done as an employee of this firm. All intellectual property belongs to Meridian Global. And now that you've been terminated for cause, you have no claim to anything. No severance, no partnership, no references. I'd suggest you leave quietly before we press criminal charges. The room spun. 6 years. 6 years of my life, my sleep, my soul. The security guard appeared at my elbow, large and impassive. I stood on legs that felt like water and walked through the office I'd called home. Colleagues I'd worked beside for years looked away. Some whispered. Someone snickered. I gathered the framed photo of my mother, my coffee mug, a plant that was already dying from neglect. They walked me out through the lobby at 11 a.m., right when everyone was heading to lunch. Dozens of people watched the perp walk. My badge was deactivated at the turnstile with a beep that sounded like a death knell. Then I was standing on Madison Avenue in November rain without an umbrella, holding a cardboard box completely and utterly destroyed. I didn't cry. Not then. I walked 20 blocks in the freezing rain to my studio apartment and sat on the floor in wet clothes. Only then did the tears come. Huge, gasping sobs that shook my whole body. I cried for my mother who died believing. I'd made it. I cried for 6 years of stolen time. I cried for my stupid, naive belief that hard work and loyalty mattered. When the tears finally stopped, I was empty, hollow, a shell of a person with no future and a past that had been weaponized against me. The next morning, I tried to fight back. I called employment lawyers, but without proof that Victoria had fabricated evidence, I had no case. The emails she'd shown me were real, messages I'd sent to my personal account backing up work, something everyone did, but which technically violated policy. She'd twisted standard practice into a fireable offense. I called former clients, but word had already spread that I was toxic, a thief. No one would touch me. I burned through my savings in 6 weeks. My landlord filed eviction papers. Maria lent me money she didn't have. I applied to hundreds of jobs, but Victoria's blacklist was comprehensive. Every interview ended the same way. Interest turning to ice when they called Meridian for references. I was standing in line at a food bank on Christmas Eve when I hit bottom. The woman in front of me had 3 kids clinging to her coat. Behind me, an old man coughed wetly into his elbow. I was holding a number, 357, waiting for donated canned goods and wondering how my mother's daughter had ended up here. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. Someone's phone played tinny Christmas music. I closed my eyes and prayed to a God I wasn't sure I believed in for anything, any sign that this nightmare would end. My phone buzzed. An unknown number. I almost didn't answer. Alexandra Martinez? The voice was male, crisp, professional. Yes? My name is James Roth. I'm the chief of staff for Richard Castellano. Mr. Castellano would like to meet with you tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. Are you available? Richard Castellano. The client. The family patriarch whose company I'd spent 8 months trying to save. Yes, I'm available. Excellent. The address is... Wait, I interrupted. Does he know? About what happened at Meridian? A pause. Mr. Castellano knows everything, Ms. Martinez. That's why he wants to meet you. I showed up at Castellano Manufacturing Headquarters at 8:30, wearing my only remaining suit, freshly dry-cleaned with Maria's credit card. The building was a converted warehouse in Long Island City, all exposed brick and steel beams, both industrial and elegant. A receptionist led me to the top floor, to an office with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the East River. Richard Castellano stood at those windows, a man in his 70s with iron gray hair and the shoulders of someone who'd worked factory floors before he'd owned them. He turned when I entered, and his eyes were sharp and assessing. Sit, he said, gesturing to a leather chair. Coffee? No, thank you. He sat across from me, steepling his fingers. I'm going to be direct, Ms. Martinez. Victoria Chen presented your strategy to my board 3 weeks ago. She claimed it as her own work. It's brilliant, truly revolutionary. My team was prepared to sign a $20 million contract with Meridian to implement it. My stomach dropped. Was? I've been in business for 52 years, he continued. I've learned to read people. And I've learned that the person who presents an idea and the person who conceived it aren't always the same. So I did some investigating. I have contacts, resources. I learned what really happened to you. He slid a folder across the desk. I opened it with shaking hands. Inside were bank records, emails, meeting notes, a complete paper trail of Victoria's scheme. She'd started planning my termination 6 months ago, right after I'd submitted my preliminary findings on Castellano. She'd fabricated evidence, coordinated with HR, timed everything perfectly to steal my work and eliminate any claim I might have to it. How did you get this? I whispered. I told you, I have resources. He leaned forward. Here's my question, Ms. Martinez. Do you want revenge or do you want justice? What's the difference? Revenge is hot. It's satisfying in the moment, but ultimately hollow. Justice is cold. It's strategic. It takes time and patience, but when it comes, it's permanent. He smiled slightly. I'm offering you the chance for justice, but you'll have to be willing to play a long game. I'll do anything. Good. Then here's what's going to happen. You're going to work for me, not as a consultant, as my chief strategy officer. You'll have equity, a seat at the table, and full credit for your ideas. You'll implement your turnaround strategy for my company, and while you're doing that, we're going to build something else. What? A lawsuit, not against Victoria personally. That would be too small. We're going after Meridian Global for fraud, corporate theft, and tortious interference with your career. We're going to expose exactly what she did and make it so public, so undeniable, that she'll never work again. But we can't do it hastily. We need evidence, testimonies, a case so airtight that they'll settle just to make it go away. I stared at him. Why would you do this for me? Because I've built this company on a principle. You reward talent and loyalty, and you punish thieves. Victoria Chen is a thief. She stole from you, and she tried to overcharge me for stolen goods. That's personal. He extended his hand. So, what do you say, Ms. Martinez? Do you want to burn the house down, or do you want to rebuild it better? I took his hand. Let's rebuild. The next 18 months were the hardest and best of my life. I worked under Richard Castellano, learning what I'd never learned at Meridian. That business wasn't about presentations and PowerPoints, but about people and principles. I implemented my strategy from the ground up, spending time on factory floors and union meetings, in supplier negotiations. We preserved 1,200 jobs. We modernized 3 facilities. We increased efficiency by 43% and profitability by 67%. And the whole time, quietly, methodically, Richard's legal team was building our case. They found other victims, junior associates Victoria had burned, ideas she'd stolen, careers she'd destroyed. They documented a pattern spanning 15 years. They found the HR director who'd helped fabricate evidence against me and convinced him to flip with immunity in exchange for testimony. They traced the emails, the timelines, the money trails. I didn't check in obsessively. I didn't let revenge consume me. I focused on my work, on building something real and good. I promoted talented people. I mentored young analysts the way Victoria should have mentored me. I built the career I'd always deserved, this time on a foundation I controlled. And then, on a Tuesday morning in April, Richard called me into his office. "It's time," he said simply. The lawsuit hit Meridian Global like a meteor strike. We filed in federal court with 200 pages of evidence and 12 plaintiffs. The press picked it up immediately. Major consulting firm accused of systemic fraud, theft of intellectual property, career sabotage. Victoria's name was everywhere. Her face on the cover of Business Week under the headline, "The Mentor Who Destroyed Her Protégés." Meridian's stock dropped 11% in 2 days. Clients started jumping ship. The SEC opened an investigation. And Victoria, brilliant Victoria, who'd always controlled every narrative, couldn't control this one. They offered to settle within 6 weeks. Richard's lawyers laughed and increased our demands. We wanted money, yes, 7 figures in damages for me, more for the others. But we wanted more than that. We wanted admissions of guilt. We wanted public apologies. We wanted Victoria's termination and a ban from consulting. We got it all. The settlement conference was held in the same building where I'd been fired, though in a different conference room. I walked in wearing a Tom Ford suit, my hair pulled back, my head high. Victoria sat across the table, flanked by lawyers, her face gaunt and pale. She'd aged 10 years in 18 months. Our eyes met. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I just looked at her until she looked away. The mediator read the terms. Meridian Global would pay $8 million to be split among the plaintiffs. They would issue public statements taking full responsibility. They would implement new oversight procedures. And Victoria Chen would resign immediately with no severance, no references, and a permanent notation in her professional record. Ms. Chen, the mediator said, do you agree to these terms? Victoria's lawyer whispered something to her. She nodded once sharply. Yes. Ms. Martinez, do you agree to these terms? I looked at her one more time. I thought about my mother's calloused hands. I thought about 6 years of my life. I thought about standing in the rain with a cardboard box, and then I thought about the last 18 months. About the factory workers who'd kept their jobs, about the young analysts I'd mentored, about the company I'd helped save and the career I'd rebuilt. Yes, I said, I agree. When it was over, when the papers were signed, and Victoria had been escorted out by her lawyers, Richard found me standing at the window, looking out at the Manhattan skyline. How do you feel? He asked. Tired, I admitted. But clean. That's justice, he said. It doesn't give you back what you lost, but it lets you move forward without the weight. He was right. The money helped. I paid off debts, donated to scholarships in my mother's name, invested the rest. But the real victory was watching Meridian's clients flood to Castellano Consulting Group, the new firm Richard and I launched 6 months later. The real victory was building something ethical and excellent, where talent was rewarded and loyalty returned. Victoria disappeared from the industry. I heard she moved to California, tried to rebrand, but her reputation followed her. She'd burned too many bridges, stolen from too many people. The same network that had blacklisted me now exiled her. I didn't celebrate that. I didn't need to. I was too busy building. 5 years later, I stood in my own corner office. This one earned, this one deserved, and looked out at the same skyline. I was a named partner now. Forbes had called me a turnaround specialist with a conscience. I had a team of 30 brilliant people who I treated the way I should have been treated. And every day I wore my mother's wedding ring on a chain around my neck, a reminder of who I'd done this for. My assistant buzzed in. Ms. Martinez, you have a visitor. Says it's personal. Send them in. Victoria Chen walked through my door. She looked smaller somehow, diminished. Her clothes were expensive but dated. Her hair was graying at the temples. She stood in the center of my office like a supplicant before a throne. Hello, Alexandra. I gestured to a chair but didn't stand. Victoria! She sat on the edge of the seat, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. I know I have no right to be here. I know what I did to you was unforgivable. But I needed to tell you that I'm sorry. Truly sorry. I waited. I didn't make it easy for her. I was afraid, she continued, her voice breaking slightly. You were so talented, so hungry. I saw you coming up behind me and I panicked. I told myself I was protecting my position, my career. But the truth is I was just a coward. And I destroyed you because I was too weak to compete with you fairly. She looked up, and I saw tears in her eyes. I lost everything. my reputation, my career, my marriage. I deserved it all. But I wanted you to know that watching what you've built, seeing you succeed with integrity, has taught me more than I taught you in 6 years. You won. Not just legally, but morally. You became everything I pretended to be. I let the silence stretch. Then I stood, walked around my desk, and faced her directly. You're right, I said quietly. You did destroy me. You took 6 years of my life and weaponized them. You pushed me to the edge of complete ruin. But here's what you didn't understand then, and maybe don't understand now. You didn't break me. You refined me. You burned away everything soft and naive and left only what was strong and true. I leaned against my desk. I don't forgive you, Victoria. I don't think I ever will. But I don't hate you either. Hate would mean you still had power over me. Instead, I thank you. Because the worst thing that ever happened to me led directly to the best thing. It led me here. She nodded slowly, tears streaming down her face now. That's more grace than I deserve. Probably, I agreed. But grace isn't about deserving. It's about being free. She stood, wiped her eyes, and walked to the door. Then she paused and turned back. For what it's worth, Alexandra, you were always the best analyst I ever worked with. I should have told you that more. I should have fought for you instead of against you. Yes, I said simply. You should have. When she left, I stood at my window for a long time, watching the city lights flicker on as dusk settled over Manhattan. I thought about the girl who'd stood in the rain with a cardboard box, certain her life was over. I thought about the woman who'd clawed her way back from nothing to build something real. They were the same person, but also completely different. My phone buzzed with a message from Maria. Drinks tonight? Want to celebrate your Forbes feature? I smiled and typed back. Absolutely, I'm buying. Because that's the thing about justice, real justice, the kind that matters. It's not about watching your enemies fall. It's about rising so high that their shadows can't reach you anymore. It's about building something so bright and true that darkness can't survive near it. Victoria had tried to bury me. Instead, she'd planted me. And I'd grown into something she could never destroy. My name is Alexandra Martinez. I was betrayed, humiliated, and nearly broken by someone I trusted. But I learned that the depth of your fall only determines the height of your rise, and that the best revenge isn't destruction. It's becoming so successful that your enemies become irrelevant to your story. That's not revenge. That's evolution. And evolution always wins.